Following the success of Romancing Saga 2, Squaresoft released Romancing Saga 3, the sixth title in the Saga series of role-playing games, in 1995. The game was a big hit in Japan and was considered one of the company's flagship titles on the Super Famicom. Even though it sold 1.3 million copies, the game never made its way to North America, which is a true shame. Thankfully, the game has since received a fan translation, making it possible for English-speaking players to experience the game today. The Saga series is famous for adopting an extremely non-linear style of gameplay, which emphasizes open-world exploration and a branching plot, where there's considerably more freedom than in games like Final Fantasy. Of course, Romancing Saga 3 is no exception. In addition, the character development system in the game is based on an idea utilized in Final Fantasy II, where individual stats are increased when abilities or circumstances tied to those stats are used in battle. For instance, the character has a chance to receive an agility boost after using short swords and martial arts attacks. In the same way, strength has the chance of being boosted after using large swords, hand axes, or large axes. The story of Romancing Saga 3 is centered upon a cataclysmic event, the Death Eclipse, which appears on the Earth every 300 years. This event occurs when a star travels in front of the sun, blocking its light, and causing a ruinous eclipse that destroys all the life on the planet. About 600 years ago, one child miraculously lived through this catastrophe and became an all-powerful being called the Devil King. He ruled the world as a tyrant, opened up an abyss filled with devil lords, and released them onto the world. However, one day he mysteriously vanishes. After the death eclipse of 300 years ago, a single child survived yet again, but this time he did not become an evil lord. He instead became a legendary hero and a holy king. He vanquished the devil lords that remained and closed the entrance to the abyss. The death eclipse hit the world yet again about 10 years prior to the events of the game, while the whole world waits for the new child of destiny, and a lot of tension looms over whether he'll be a devil king or holy king. In Romancing Saga 3, the player is given the choice at the beginning of the game to select a main character out of 8 choices. Each character is thrust into the center of a war between Godwyn, the rebellious minister of the Kingdom of Loan, and Mikhail, the King of Loan. The game's story unfolds differently depending on the character you select, but it is also affected by the events that have already occurred, what is said in conversations, and who is present in the party. Even still, at a high level, the story is mostly the same overarching narrative. As one of the game's highlights, combat utilizes a turn-based combat system that will be familiar to most fans of the genre. Each character can execute and unlock a series of techniques. These techniques are divided by weapon type, giving each weapon a specific set of techniques. There is also magic in the game, but it isn't dependent on weapon type. Unlike some RPGs, the characters leap across the screen and execute unique animations for techniques and spells. Some of these attacks were just downright awesome, and it really was a cool facet of the game that wasn't done in many other RPGs at the time. Formations for combat are also a great touch, and the game is very customizable in this way. Different formations allow you to make strategic decisions to survive battles, and this is especially useful for the boss battles. Unfortunately, the stat-based progression system the game offers seems to be a bit arbitrary and frustrating. During the early parts of the game, stat progression is relatively steady, with skill-ups occurring consistently. However, by the end of the game, you reach a point where some stat increases reach a near standstill, which only encourages painful grinding. Also, weapon skill-ups require finding specific types of enemies and using specific skills ad nauseum in the hopes that a skill-up will occur. Although this type of progression system is a hallmark of the Saga franchise, I can say that games like Romancing Saga 2 and Saga Frontier didn't seem nearly as tedious. Although the skill-up system has some faults, I think the game's technique system is a unique high point. In Romancing Saga 3, new techniques are learned through preconditions that make the character think of the technique during combat. New techniques can only be learned by using the new skill's parent technique enough times in battle to trigger the process. When this occurs, you see a little light bulb animation and perform the new technique for the first time. Using the new techniques enough times will allow the character to master it. There are some other odd quirks about the game, like the inability to have access to items in combat. Instead, items are only available from the menu screen and there is very limited space for them. Also, unlike games like Final Fantasy, your party's hit points refill to full after battle, which is actually pretty convenient. It's just something to get used to. It's also possible to save almost anywhere in the world. The game's storyline really has some high and low points. Overall, I found the character development in Romancing Saga 3 to be lacking. I actually thought the premise for the game's overarching story was great and really unique. However, the same cannot be said when it comes to the characters, where the game kinda keeps you hanging. During the introduction sequences, the character development is actually quite strong, but these moments are seemingly abandoned after a certain point. Also, the party's eventual objective in the game is to beat the 4 bosses of the Abyss, but I don't think the game does a very good job of explaining why. If you're expecting the game's story to be something like Final Fantasy VI, you'll be disappointed. That's not to say that what is there is particularly bad though, it's just not as riveting as some of its counterparts. The music of Romancing Saga 3 was composed by Kenji Ito, who had also composed the previous 2 games in the Saga series, Romancing Saga and Romancing Saga 2. There are 68 tracks comprising an immense variety of themes and moods to fit the game's story. Out of all the soundtracks Ito has done that I have listened to, I think this one's actually the best, and honestly the music is probably the best aspect of Romancing Saga 3. A few of my favorite songs include the opening theme, Boss Battle, Mikhail's theme, and Demon King Palace. The graphics in Romancing Saga 3 are about at the level one would expect from a game of its time, and look pretty reminiscent of Final Fantasy VI. In battle, the sprite attack animations are much more advanced when compared to many of the games of the era though, as are the spell effects. The backgrounds won't blow you away or anything, but the colors are vibrant, and there's lots of differing environments the game offers. No matter how you slice it, North American RPG fans certainly missed out on this game, and it is more than worth it to revisit it today. However, the SNES translation that is widely available unfortunately leaves much to be desired, as there's some awkward grammar and sentence structure there. It may please some fans to know that after the success of the Romancing Saga 2 remake on Steam and mobile phones, Square Enix has decided to bring Romancing Saga 3 into the new generation as well, on PlayStation Vita and mobile platforms. And that will do it for my Romancing Saga 3 retrospective and review. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and leave me a comment below about what you liked about this game, and check out my other videos.